This is the Lylat system, a galaxy at the center of the Milky Way, home to thriving civilizations across planets rich with resources and life. But peace, as always, is fragile. The Lylatians lived comfortably, but envy grew beyond their borders, fueled by none other than Dr. Andros, a scientific genius from Corneria, the fourth planet in the system. And like any mad scientist worth their salt, Andros went a little too far, experimenting with hyperspatial energy engines right in the heart of Corneria's most populated city. After repeated warnings, the Council had had enough and banished him to Venom, a planet that is rarely explored. And for a while, everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. Unusual activity on Venom, mysterious ships, whispers of rebellion, and soon Corneria found itself under siege. Cities burned, fleets were destroyed, and Andros's forces crept closer to total domination. Desperate to protect their home, the people of Corneria turned to their last hope, Star Fox, a small elite team of mercenaries equipped with experimental R-Wing fighters, and their mission? Break through Andros's force, dismantle his empire, and save the Lylat system from certain annihilation. Leading the charge is Fox McCloud, an 18-year-old prodigy and their greatest chance of survival. The fate of the galaxy rests on his shoulders. He needs to bring back peace to Lylat, and make sure his team comes home alive in the process. At first glance, it may seem like Nintendo abandoned Star Fox, and in a way, they kinda did. The franchise was once a massive success, utilizing groundbreaking tech, introducing a cast of charming characters, and delivering a shooter experience that was hard to replicate. Star Fox on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and Star Fox 64 each sold about 4 million copies, securing Fox McCloud's place as one of Nintendo's biggest stars. There's a lot of love for this guy, but then the numbers tell a different story. Star Fox Adventures, 1.82 million. Star Fox Assault, 899,000. Star Fox Zero, 440,000 copies sold. Each new attempt at reviving the series sold less than the last. Nintendo kept trying to reinvent Star Fox, but fans just weren't showing up. Was it a shooter? An adventure game? A strategy game? And I'd argue these releases just suffered from horrible timing. If Star Fox had landed on the Wii instead of skipping the entire generation, we might be having a very different conversation right now. So the short answer to the question is this. It comes down to sales and mismanagement of the franchise. Maybe Nintendo is working on a new title right now, but looking at the numbers, Star Fox just doesn't seem worth the investment to them. How did a franchise that started as one of Nintendo's most innovative IPs end up in this position? To really understand, we need to walk through both the narrative and the games, because Star Fox wasn't just a casualty of bad sales. It was a series that I believe Nintendo could never quite figure out. I used to call this type of video Origin Oracle, and I don't even know what that entails anymore, but we're gonna call it that anyway.
What is that?
Where I do a deep dive on your favorite video game characters. We're going into a whole new galaxy with Star Fox, so if you enjoy and want to see more Star Fox, let me know by leaving a like or a comment on the video. Now, let's head back in time and uncover the story of Nintendo's black sheep character, Fox McCloud.
I go to the next level when you can go light years beyond. You are Fox McCloud in Star Fox, only for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Fox McCloud made his debut in the 1993 Super Nintendo classic Star Fox, a rail shooter that pushed the limits of gaming with its groundbreaking 3D graphics. Players piloted Fox's R-Wing through hostile environments, taking down enemies while keeping his team alive. Nintendo pulled this off with a custom-made chip at the time that was used to process these 3D-style graphics, something that really made this particular title stand out during the heated console wars of that time. Nintendo made this possible with the revolutionary Super FX chip, a custom processor designed to bring true 3D graphics to the Super Nintendo. An absolute flex on the competition. The game takes place in the Lylat system, a galaxy filled with anthropomorphic animal species. The Star Fox team is led by Fox McCloud. And thinking on it now, imagine if you named your child Human. Alongside him are Falco Lombardi, Peppy Hare, and Slippy Toad. Your trusted teammates that are computer controlled, and it really feels like they're flying alongside you the whole time. And at that time, Star Fox had a very unique way of storytelling by integrating radio chatter into the levels to move the plot along. This radio chatter is awesome for character development and gives Fox's team distinct character traits. There are even several scripted moments where the game will test you and have one of your teammates fly into view, asking Fox to help get the enemies off their tails. And if you ignore them or fail to take the right shot, they will get shot down and won't return for the rest of the game. The cool thing about Star Fox is that there are multiple paths the player can take as well. 3 in particular, and each will have a different difficulty. allowing the player to switch things up on each playthrough. Star Fox is a brand new intellectual property from the mind of Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of franchises like Mario and Zelda, but the story behind Star Fox predates his involvement. This time we travel to England in the early 80s. A company named Argonaut Software Limited is launched by 16-year-old Jez San, who would get his start by creating simple games for the Commodore 64, Amiga, and eventually the Game Boy. One of these games was Starglider, a spaceflight simulator that takes place from the perspective of a pilot in the cockpit who's blasting invaders off their planet. That sounds familiar. So by 1990, Argonaut Software would try their hand at creating Game Boy games, but to get the attention of Nintendo, they tried something a little unorthodox. San would send them a proof of concept, proving he could get past their copyright protection mechanism on the Game Boy. I turned up at Nintendo's booth at that year's Consumer Electronics Show and tried to find the most senior person at Nintendo at that time, which turned out to be Don James. I walked up to him and showed him our game, and his jaw dropped, both for the demo itself and also the way it defeated their protection. He roped in Wayne Shirk and Tony Harmon to see the demo, and they were extremely impressed with what we could do and our enthusiasm. I told him that we wanted to work with them and had a talented team in London, and that we were good at 3D games. And so a partnership was made, with Argonaut initially developing a prototype on the Nintendo Entertainment System for a title codenamed NES Glider, which took a ton of inspiration from their earlier Starglider title. While Nintendo initially suggested that the game should be an arcade-style shooter, Argonaut went all in with the idea for spaceships, and then they would move this prototype to the more powerful Super Nintendo. But Jez San wasn't satisfied. He told Nintendo that SNES Glider had hit its limits of their hardware, and if they wanted true 3D, they would need custom hardware instead. So instead of backing down, Nintendo agreed, and Argonaut brought in a team of hardware specialists and developed what would become the Super FX chip, a revolutionary processor that made real 3D gaming on the Super Nintendo possible. With the Super FX chip in place, Nintendo took charge of shaping Star Fox into a true Nintendo classic. Leading the charge was Shigeru Miyamoto as producer, alongside Katsuya Eguchi as director, who would later go on to create Animal Crossing. Character design was handled by Takaya Imamura, who also played a key role in the F-Zero series. So Miyamoto wanted to avoid conventional sci-fi tropes with humans, robots, monsters, or superheroes, and opted to have the entire cast be animal characters. Then there's the R-Wings, piloted by the Star Fox team during the game, which were inspired by X-Wings from Star Wars, while the gates that we see Fox fly through in several levels in the game reminded Miyamoto of the Senbon Tori gates at the Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine in Kyoto, a place Miyamoto frequently visited. And it's this location that ties into why Fox is a fox. In an interview with former Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata, Miyamoto has said, quote, "We were like, but animal characters in a shooting game? That's precisely why it would have impact," and started thinking about which animals to use. Star Fox has a lot of scenes in which the fighter goes through arches, which reminds me of one of the gates at Shinto shrines called Tori. And Tori made me think of the thousands of such gates at Fushimi Inari Taisha. In a prototype, there were a lot of scenes going through there, and when you think of Fushimi Inari, you think of foxes. And there used to be a boys' baseball team in the area called the Inari Foxes. And I thought, foxes! Now that's cool. So it was the English word for fox from the start, not the Japanese word kitsune. The amount of associations here sounds like a conspiracy, but this is all true.
And 785 is the area code of Topeka, oh my god.
And Imamura would follow this up with other animals that were significant to Japanese folklore, which led to a bird and a hare for two of the other members of Star Fox, Falco and Peppy. A toad was chosen by another Nintendo staff member who used a toad as his own personal mascot. So Miyamoto was also a fan of puppets from the British sci-fi television show Thunderbirds, and wanted to take a similar approach for the Star Fox roster. So for the game's box artwork, Miyamoto created puppets himself and photographed them for this iconic shot. And so, Star Fox was born. The game first launched in Japan in February 1993 and in March 1993 in North America, and became both a critical and commercial success, selling over 1.7 million units in both Japan and the US, becoming the fastest selling video game launch in North America up until then. A milestone that proved Nintendo had just created a new flagship series. So with a hit game, cutting-edge technology, and a world full of potential, Star Fox had everything it needed to become a long-term Nintendo staple. But before we move forward, let's finish this fight. After a grueling battle through the Lylat system, Fox and his team finally reach Venom, where Andross awaits. But just before the final showdown, he pauses to speak. But what he says depends on the route you took. On the hardest path, he utters something far more personal. Your father was a reckless fighter too. You know, it's been a while since I played the original Fox and I completely forgot his dad was barely mentioned in this game, but we'll get to him later. Fox destroys Andross in this insane psychedelic mess, and it's awesome. And what a way to flex your 3D chip by making the final boss a straight up cube. But the words from Andross left a lingering question. What exactly happened to Fox McCloud's father? In the original Star Fox, this was left ambiguous, but future games would dive deeper into Fox's past, revealing a personal tragedy that shaped him into the leader of the Star Fox team. Fans looking for answers at that time didn't have to wait, because released that same year, Nintendo Power's Star Fox comics by Benimaru Ito gave us our first real look into Fox McCloud's past, introducing us to his father, Fox McCloud Sr. That's not what I remember your name being. This was a 132-page adaptation of the original game, which did wonders for world building for the Lylat system and the characters of Star Fox. And here's where we get our first look at Fox's home planet, Papatoon. Papatoon is one of the more obscure lore points in Star Fox. Introduced in the Nintendo Power comics as Fox's homeworld, no doubt a reference to Luke Skywalker's home planet of Tatooine. But it's on Papatoon where Fox and his team operate like a Robin Hood style set of outlaws, raiding Andross's Imperial ships. And this setup made the Star Fox team feel more rebellious, even outcast of the Lylat system itself. But here's the strange part. Papatoon isn't mentioned anywhere in the original Super Nintendo game. It didn't appear in any official Japanese game manuals, guides, or marketing materials at that time either. So the team gets a call from General Pepper, the dog that says, "Good luck," in these games. But he's the leader of Corneria's forces and requests Fox and his gang pilot their Arwen ships, the most sophisticated starfighters in the galaxy, to take down the Imperials, to which Star Fox agrees. I mainly bring up this comic because it's here I think the personalities of Star Fox were shaped in more detail, with Falco being the wisecracking hothead of the group, Peppy the more elder and knowledgeable member, and Slippy the loyal and more timid of the bunch. And on this mission, they rescue a hostage named Farah Phoenix, daughter of a rich spaceship businessman. But after saving Farah, she proves she's an ace pilot and joins their team as well. And her and Fox start flirting during battle and it gets hot and heavy. So I guess with his adrenaline through the roof, Fox has this wild idea to fly through a black hole to spring a surprise attack on Andross, and everyone says how horrible of a plan this is. So we learn Fox McCloud Sr. was the best pilot on Corneria. After Fox Jr. was born, his mother died shortly after. So with Fox Sr. going double time on dad duty, he roped his son in to be a pilot just like him. Meanwhile, Andross is developing dangerous weapons for Corneria at that time, including a gravity bomb, to which Fox Sr. volunteers to deliver it to an asteroid belt for testing, not knowing the total risks behind it. Stupid. And it blows up, sucking him into a black hole, and he was never seen again. Stupid. The magnitude of the weapon had them send Andross into exile, and you know the rest. So Fox feels confident enough to use the R-Wings to fly through a black hole, so they successfully do this. And the comic continues to play out similarly to the first Star Fox game, with Fox and the team assaulting Venom and taking down Andross. And then the plot is just kinda on its own, like interstellar space whale blimps on its own. And Fox's father is apparently alive on this ship but is stuck in that dimension and can never return home. And then other weird things happen, like Fox inviting Farah back to his Fox den to try on his mother's dress that he's been saving. What? And then says his dad would drop dead if he ever saw her like this. What is happening right now? So in Nintendo's defense, a lot of this lore would eventually change in future Star Fox games, but this comic served as a major setup for Fox as a character and the relationship with his team. Which brings us to the first little hiccup for the Star Fox series, Star Fox 2.
Andross is back, and he's launching waves of powerful spaceships towards Corneria. The Lylat system needs Star Fox.
Star Fox is back in this exciting sequel for the Super Nintendo. Better graphics, smoother gameplay, more characters. The amount of new features here are insane. But even an upgraded version of the Super FX chip was once again developed by Argonaut Software, aptly named the Super FX 2. Andross didn't get blown up hard enough in the last game and returns to attack Corneria. So Star Fox, the heroes of the Lylat system, must come back with their upgraded R-Wings to take down Andross for good this time. Joining their team are Miu, a lynx, and Faye, a white dog. So in the game, the player will select two pilots and strategically navigate the Lylat system to both defend Corneria while running an assault on Andross. And just like the first game, the plot remains pretty simple, but this game introduced lore that would influence the rest of the series, like the introduction of Starwolf, rival mercenary pilots that worked for Andross led by Wolf O'Donnell, a known criminal in the galaxy. Joining him is Leon Kowalski, a chameleon, Algae, is this supposed to be a lemur? And then Pigma Dengar, the most despicable character in this entire series, but that's not really established here yet, so For now, he's just another member of Star Wolf. But Nintendo would take Star Fox 2 to 1995's Winter Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas to demo to the world what they'd accomplished. Even a man was arrested and charged with grand larceny for trying to steal a demo cartridge from the floor. This is a true story. I wonder where this guy is now. So with this highly advanced game with an upgraded chip, surely Nintendo released this, championing its improved 3D graphics. It was cancelled. This was slated for a 1995 release, but there was something else brewing that made Nintendo feel this wouldn't be the best game to release at that time.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Yeah, with the upcoming Sony PlayStation console with its highly improved 3D graphics and an affordable price point, Nintendo strategically decided to lock Star Fox 2 away into the Nintendo black hole, with it being reportedly 95% completed at that time. The good news is Nintendo would officially release it 22 years later on the Nintendo Switch, closing the book on the story of it being lost media once and for all. But on the hardware side, they would use the Super FX 2 chip to develop Yoshi's Island, which remains as a certified Nintendo classic. But I would say Nintendo didn't just abandon Star Fox 2, they reworked it into something even bigger. So rather than release it on aging hardware, they made a bet. A risky but calculated move to shift Star Fox onto their next generation console. And that gamble paid off.
Introducing Star Fox 64 with Rumble Pack, only for Nintendo 64.
The Lylat system. This small group of planets enjoyed years of prosperity until Andros came into view. Andros was born and raised on Corneria and grew to be a brilliant scientist. Wait, is this the same story as the first game? Star Fox 64, released for the Nintendo 64 in 1997. It is a reimagining of the original game, fleshing out its story, world, and characters into something much bigger. Kinda interesting to see people debate whether this is a sequel or a retelling, with some saying this takes place in a different dimension. But for simplicity's sake, let's call it what it is, a full reboot. And these events are known as the Lylat Wars, and this time we get a deeper look at the history of the Star Fox crew. We find out the original team was comprised of James McCloud, Fox's father, who's no longer Fox Sr. He has an official name now. There's also Peppy Hare, who is still a part of the team. And wait a minute, Pigma Dengar? Isn't that asshole from the Star Wolf team in Star Fox 2?
Daddy screamed real good before he died.
Well, apparently he betrayed his team and turned them over to Andros, with Peppy barely managing to escape. And as for James, he's presumed dead, never seen again. Now, years later, Andros launches an all-out attack on the Lylat system. With Corneria under siege, General Pepper calls upon the new Star Fox team, Fox, Peppy, Falco, and Slippy, to put a stop to Andros once and for all. Along the way, they battle Andros' forces, rival mercenaries Star Wolf, and even take missions alongside allies like Bill Gray and Cat Monroe, old friends of Fox and Falco respectively. And with Star Wolf officially introduced in this game, they had one replacement since the days of Star Fox 2, and that's our lemur friend Algie.
You'll be sorry you crossed us.
Who gets swapped out with Andros' nephew, Andrew Okani. So this journey leads Fox across multiple planets with 25 possible paths within the game. And it's with this game that Star Fox returned triumphantly, with the primitive polygons upgraded into fully shaped R-Wings, and the radio chatter now fully voiced.
I see him up ahead. Let's rock and roll.
And though Faye and Miyu never got to cross over from Star Fox 2, the team now has a mothership known as the Great Fox and a robot pilot, Rob64, or the CP3O lookalike in this game. All the scattered lore points we see across Star Fox, the Nintendo Power Comic, and Star Fox 2 start to meet here. For the first time, Papatoon was directly referenced in the game's prologue. Peppy, after escaping Andros' trap, returns to Papatoon to tell Fox the truth about his father's fate. And here's the weird part. This is only in the Japanese version.
故郷の惑星パペトゥーンに戻り、ジェームスの息子フォックスに父親の最後を告げた。
Nintendo of America erased all mention of Papatoon from the English localization of Star Fox 64. It wasn't in the manual, the marketing, or even the Nintendo Power Strategy Guide. And even in the 3DS remake, Star Fox 64 3D, they remove all references to Papatoon again. I didn't think Star Fox could get more inconsistent than Mario or Zelda, yet here we are. Anyway, Nintendo didn't just want a sequel, they wanted 64 to be bigger, better, and a flagship title for the N64. Shigeru Miyamoto took a hands-on role in shaping Star Fox 64 into a cinematic experience, much like what was going on with Ocarina of Time. And he had two major goals: to finally make Star Fox the game he always envisioned, free from the Super Nintendo hardware limitations, and to salvage the best ideas from Star Fox 2 so its development wouldn't go to waste. So this is why about 60% of Star Fox 64's gameplay came from Star Fox 2. Features like all-range modes, Star Wolf, and multiplayer were all Star Fox 2 concepts that made their way into this game. At one point, the team even wanted to add an on-foot level where Fox would fight Andross with a bazooka, but they cut this for the sake of time, repurposing its assets for multiplayer mode. But one of the biggest innovations at the time was the Rumble Pack. Nintendo designed Star Fox 64 to be the first game to launch with force feedback, making every explosion and laser shot feel tangible. Miyamoto would later reveal that players were initially confused by the vibrating controller. Some thought it was a glitch. The team had to refine its implementation, making it react to key moments like when a laser barely misses your R-wing or an explosion shakes the cockpit. Takaya Imamura would return as the lead artist and designer for Star Fox 64, but this time around he would be responsible for several other roles in the creation of this game, including planning, the writing of the plot, music direction, and coming up with many of the gameplay mechanics and graphics. He described Star Fox 64 as the game of his life. Other developers had input into the Star Fox game that was being shaped as well, with the team coming up with the addition of levels that introduced the Landmaster, as well as the Blue Marine submarine. And this shift in gameplay would be the team's response to Miyamoto's suggestion to include a human-type craft. Imagine if the team went along with that idea. We would have gotten to see Fox pilot a whole Gundam. But the team's involvement took a step further. They actually provided the voice acting for the characters as well, with Imamura stepping up to voice Fox. But apparently this wasn't a popular decision internally, and they'd ultimately hire professional voice actors. But the original voices can be found on YouTube after being uncovered in a leak back in 2020.
異常なし。ちょっと右にずれているが問題はない。こちらペピー。わしは OK だ。フォックス。
システムバランス確認。OK だけど。こちらスリッピー。大丈夫大丈夫。
前方に敵確認。スターフォックス。出撃。
I don't know, this is a bit charming to me. But it's multiplayer mode that made this game the 90s gem that it is. Just looking at this instantly takes me back to a time where you're sleeping over a cousin's house and spend hours shooting each other out of the sky. Up to 4 players could play at a time, with initially the R-Wings being the default fighter machines, but if you get enough medals during the campaign, you can unlock the Landmaster or fight on foot with that bazooka I mentioned earlier. And this was huge. Something about just dropping the R-Wing and Fox saying, fine, I'll do it myself. Anyway, let's head back to the plot. Fox and his team fight their way through Venom, where Andross awaits, and this time, not as a weird polygon cube, but a massive ape head. I mean, what is Andross at this point? Okay, so he's a massive floating brain with detachable eyeballs. It all makes sense now. If the player takes the hardest route, James McCloud, Fox's father, suddenly appears, guiding Fox out of Andross's collapsing lair. So is James really alive? Is he a ghost? A hallucination? The game never fully explains it, and honestly, that ambiguity makes the ending even more memorable. But with Andross defeated, again, the team returns home victorious, celebrated, and cemented as legends. And this just feels good. So this is the moment Star Fox had everything it needed to be a Nintendo staple, right? Despite Star Fox 64's critical and commercial success, it wasn't the revolution some expected, even back in that time. The game was a hit, selling over 1 million copies in the US by the end of '97, and even breaking records for fastest selling Nintendo 64 titles. Critics praised the branching paths, precise controls, and replay value, with many calling it an instant classic. But here's the problem. While Star Fox 64 was widely praised for refining the series' gameplay, some critics noted that it didn't represent a major leap forward in the way Super Mario 64 or The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time had for their franchises. Outlets like Electronic Gaming Monthly and GameSpot praised the game's polish, but pointed out that it largely stuck to the on-rail shooter formula, established in the SNES original. This wasn't necessarily seen as a flaw at the time, but it highlighted a challenge Nintendo would face in the future. How do you evolve Star Fox without losing its identity? I mean, this franchise has so much background lore. Mercenary outlaws, a home planet that barely exists in canon, deep betrayals, these rivalries, and even a mysterious lost father. You'd think Star Fox would have this massive fleshed out universe. But instead, the games kinda keep things simple. And I'll give them a pass for Star Fox and Star Fox 64, but most of these games only scratch the surface of this lore, and players get hints of a larger world, but almost none of it is expanded upon in the games itself. And maybe that's where the disconnect started. On one hand, Nintendo created a universe that could have been their Star Wars, a rich sci-fi setting with deep character relationships and rivalries. And on the other, the games never fully committed to that. Was it just an arcade shooter? Cinematic space opera? Was it an open-end adventure with dogfights and strategy? Personally, to me, Fox belongs in a fighting game, because in 1999 when Super Smash Bros. Hit the scene, it felt like Fox and his maps just dominated this game. Star Fox music was the most prominent, Star Fox maps some of the most used, Fox himself had this whole badass fighting kit that only got better in the follow-up title. If you haven't caught on by now, all these videos are leading up to a big Super Smash Bros. Video, hint hint. But Nintendo would explore other gameplay options after Star Fox 64 to further expand this series, so next time we'll dive into the titles that started this Star Fox identity crisis and see where the decline for this series began.